great panel of super experienced engineers and geologists, and they have a lot to share with us today about their journey, getting their professional licenses and some other certificates that we'll highlight today. So it's 3 p.m. We're going to go ahead and get started. Um, I will let the our guest speakers introduce themselves. If everybody wants to come off really quickly and just do a quick introduction, and then we can get some more detailed introductions as we get to their specific presentations. But we'll start off with Jacobin.
Hey, yeah, Jack Coban with Worley, our geoscience and strategic growth lead here in the Gulf Coast. So yeah, just really excited to be here. And again, I'll get a little more detail about what I do and kind of how I got here. But thanks for the opportunity to talk to you guys.
Thank you, Jack. Next, we have Dr. Brett Webb.
Yeah, Brett Webb, professor of coastal engineering at the University of South Alabama. And like Jack, I'll tell you a little bit more about my background when we get to my presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Webb. We have Taylor Zimmerman on the line. Taylor is one of our old S&P presidents, so super excited to have them back to present to us today.
Nice. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'm Taylor with McLaren Engineering Group, based out of New Jersey, New York.
Thank you, Taylor. And then if we have time permitting, we're also gonna hear from some of our S&P members. We got Ben Combada, Tyler Jacobs, and I think I saw Nicole is on the line. She might have to run out for a meeting. But these are just 3 of our amazing young students and new professionals that have already passed the professional engineering exam. So we'll get into the details of it. Just a quick overview. Essentially you pass your fundamentals of engineering exam. You have um 3 to 4 years of experience you need to get, and then you need to pass the professional engineering exam. But these three superstars have already passed their exam before they even have their experience, so they're killing it. And they're going to share some information about new testing formats and what to expect, and just give kind of a younger, real fresh perspective. So with that, we will go ahead and get into our first presentation from Jack. Um, Jack, take it away.
All right. See, make sure everyone can see my screen fine. If you have any trouble, just let me know. Just a little bit about me real quick. So I did my undergraduate studies at Ole Miss, as you can see by the hat here. That was in geological engineering, and then went straight into master's program. I started at Ole Miss and then transferred to Memphis just because of employment opportunities. So I worked full time, which I wouldn't recommend doing that. It's a lot of work, but it was I guess it was good experience builder and good character builder. Finished that in 2008 before I moved to Louisiana, and ended up moving back to Memphis to go pursue a PhD in earth science, more focused on like fluvial geomorphology, but still had some of the aqueous geochemistry in there. And then as it relates to ASBPA, I'm on the board, and I'm also a Central Gulf Coast chapter board member and charter member. Locally, I'm also a board member for ASCE's Baton Rouge branch. So I'm actually going to be president this coming board year, but currently president elect. And then I work also with Coast Builders Coalition, which is another Louisiana based coastal advocacy group, similar to ASBPA, but more so or focused on Louisiana as opposed to more national as ASBPA is. And I also serve on the LSU Center for Energy Studies Advisory Council. Just kind of give you a little idea of my career path. So I did some summer interning, which anyone who's in school still, I definitely recommend trying to get out and get some intern opportunities. There's always companies that are looking for interns over the summer, more than you'd think. Sometimes it just takes getting a phone call or getting the phone and calling people, and that's how I got mine, was just looking through the phone book. I guess there's still phone books these days, but like finding engineering companies and just giving them a cold call and say, hey, you guys taking internships? And it is a great way to get your foot in the door, get a little experience, get some face time with companies that you may be able to roll into a job with. And I know when I was at Fugro, we always had interns, and kind of use that as a way to vet kids who were in school, and like, hey, if this guy or girl was doing a good job for us over the summer, that was a person we'd call back for employment when we needed it when they graduated. So definitely recommend that. I got my EIT and GI, in consecutive years. And I'll get more into that later, but definitely if you're in school and your university offers that as like something they proctor, I highly recommend taking it when you're a senior or in grad school, as I did. It makes it a lot easier. Kind of moving down, I got my PE in 2011, and then a little while later, I got my PG. It was actually something that wasn't offered in Louisiana when I first lived here. So they didn't start their program until like 2015 or 2016, I guess. So I think I was actually the first person and only person the first year they offered proctoring the exam in Baton Rouge, because for a long time they had it, from other states. People had to go to like Alabama or Tennessee or somewhere that offered the exam to go take it there. So for the longest time, I had the highest grade ever scored on the ASBOG test in Mississippi, or sorry, in Louisiana, but I also had the lowest by that same standard. So, finished up my PhD in 2017 and started working with Fugro over that time. Moved up the ranks there, and then started with Worley this January. So that's just a quick kind of rundown of where I've been. But as far as my presentation, really be focusing on the PG license. I would definitely, check your state's recommendation or requirements, but because they tend to differ a little bit state to state. But generally speaking, you have to have a BS or a BA in some kind of geosciences field, so like geological engineering, geophysics, geology, something like that. And I know some civil engineering, if you have like a geotechnical background, you can apply for it as well. You've got to pass the fundamentals of geology test. So, like I said, take that one as early as you can. And then that allows you to register as a geologist in training for whatever state that you're in, wherever they offer that. And then you need to have your years of experience. Typically, it's like 3 to 5 years, and it depends on your educational background too. I think if you get an advanced degree like master's or PhD, they waive some of those years of experience. But then also you got to take the practice of engineering, which is the PG exam. So it's very similar kind of structure to the PE that you have to take. So knowing your licensing status, or the state status for licensing. So you can see by the map here, some of these states don't offer a license at all. And then other ones, they require you to take an ASBOG test. I think Alaska is the only one that makes you take the American Institute of Professional Geologists exam. And then some of them have state-based exams, and those they may have special requirements based on I guess unique geological conditions. I know Florida and California, from what I understand, for both the PG and PE, they take the ASBOG, but you have to take specific parts of that test that are focused on things like karst and seismic issues, because those are really big issues in those states. Someone is now a panda. Sorry, I was looking at the faces on the bottom. I got a little distracted there. So I guess reasons to get a license. For one thing, it's a good way to advance your career. Increases your opportunities. Like if someone comes in and there's like 5 resumes all working to try to get with the same job, if I see someone who's got their license versus someone who doesn't, that person's going to move to the top of the heap. It also is the same thing goes for if you're applying for position or projects and contracts. If you put together a statement of qualifications and all your resumes are people who don't hold licenses versus another package where everyone holds a license, that group is going to be weighted a lot higher. And then in some cases, for state contracts and federal contracts, it's a requirement that your principals or whoever your lead personnel are to be licensed in those states. So it's really important for getting work. It helps public trust. If you go into a doctor's office, you want to know that person is licensed and certified in those areas that you're being treated in. You don't want to go and have a dermatologist doing like brain surgery on you, or someone who doesn't have a specialty in those areas. So same thing goes for technical projects like engineering and geology. You want to have someone who's licensed. It helps you in professional development. Some of it is good because you should always be trying to increase your knowledge and keeping up with the latest and greatest research in your practice. But by having a license, you're required to take or earn so many hours of professional development each renewal period. So it kind of gives you incentive to go and do that. And then the biggest thing, I guess, is earning potential. If you're a licensed person is in engineering or geology or whatever, your earning potential is much higher than someone who's unlicensed. And so ASCE actually did a salary report in 2023, and I think this is probably more for civil engineers, but it still is valid point for anything. But the earning potential was like nearly $30,000 a year higher for someone with a license versus someone without a license with similar background. So Very, very important. And just my kind of like 5 points of advice, like I said before, don't wait. Most universities, at least at Ole Miss, I know they did. They offered proctoring the FE and the P or FG on campus once a year. And it was almost this kind of like unwritten rule that when you were a senior or about to graduate, or you were a grad student, this was part of your curriculum. You didn't have to have it to graduate, but they strongly encouraged, and it just makes it a lot easier. Like the fundamentals exam is much more focused on the things that you're learning in school. It's not as much the practical application, but much more of like the kind of educational background. So you're going to be better prepared to take it when you're fresh right out of school versus waiting 5 years and then trying to go back and learn all that stuff. I recommend definitely getting in professional organizations. Obviously, you guys who are all here are part of ASBPA, Students New Professionals, so you're already taking a step in the right track. But I recommend getting involved with other organizations when you get out of school. These things help keep you up to date on your PDHs that you're going to need to maintain your license, and also it's good just for networking and other things. Keep records. When you have your PE or PG, you have to have your PDHs recorded. You need to keep track of them. It's good to just keep like a spreadsheet with all of them that has the date. And if you have certificates or things to go with it, like PDF those things and put them in a folder, because some states like Louisiana require you to keep up with like 5 years. I think it's like it's 2 renewal cycles. So if you're on a 2-year renewal period, you got to have your 2 years plus like that extra 5th year. So you really got to have like 3 cycles. So keep track of those things in case you ever get audited or someone questions your PDH records. Staying current. So, make sure you're keeping your license up to date. Make sure you're keeping your information up to date, because I had a problem when I moved from Tennessee to Louisiana and back to Tennessee, where I actually, before Tennessee had a PG license, I was just a registered geologist there. But then they grandfathered everyone in. So I was a PG in Tennessee and didn't even know it, because I moved and like my mail was going to the wrong address. And like, I don't know, I just never even thought about it. And so I ended up losing that license because of that. So that was I was going to have to retake the exam and all this other stuff. And since I was moving back to Louisiana anyway, I just let it lapse. But it could have been really problematic for me otherwise. So make sure you keep up with all that stuff, and then participate in policy making. I know ASBPA is very active when it comes to legislative policy. The ASBPA Coastal Summit, we go out and we do these legislative visits and things like that. But know the policy in your state. Like in Louisiana, there are politicians who have tried to undo the licensing requirements. Like there's a guy named I forget his first name now, but Presley. He's a state legislator from Shreveport. He has like a donor of his who was getting in trouble with Louisiana's licensing board because this guy kept claiming that he was an engineering company and providing engineering services, even though they're not. And the state licensing board got onto him. Well, this guy Presley decided to try and go pass legislation to just do away with licensing altogether to help that guy out, which is a whole different level of problems. I wouldn't. I guess I'd go so far as to say it's probably political corruption, but still, it's a problem because it could have potentially put Louisiana in a position where we would have, no licensing requirements. So that takes away that element of public trust. It takes away the element of public safety. And ASCE, ASC, or ACEC, and all these other professional organizations on geosciences and engineering side let these guys have it, and they dropped the legislation. But it was important for us to be aware of that, and for our organizations and professionals to go out and make their voices heard on that, because that could have been very detrimental to the safety of Louisiana and our infrastructure, which is very important to us. So those things I highly recommend you as your career goes on, be involved in those kinds of things. And there's more advice I could offer, but these are kind of like, I guess, the 5 I would say are the most important. But I think that's really all I've got on my presentation. And I know we got Q&A coming up later in the segment here. So I guess I'll turn it over to Dr. Webb from here.
Thank you so much, Jack. That was an awesome presentation. So much great information. Guys, the presentations will be made available after in a day or two. So feel free to contact and reach out to our presenters today. Also, if you have any questions, I don't want you guys, forgetting them by the time we get to the question and answer session. So please feel free to add them into the chat, address it to the presenter you're asking it to, or if it's, just kind of open-ended and anybody can answer, that's fine too. And we will make sure we get to them during the question and answer. But yeah, thank you, Jack, so much. That was awesome.
Hey, thank you, guys.
Next we have Dr. Brett Webb. Dr. Webb, I have your presentation available. If you'd like to present it yourself, that's great too.
I'll take care of it. Jack, if you can stop screen sharing so I can pop in. There we go. Let's see. Hopefully this works correctly. All right, let me swap displays. All right, I think you're seeing the right thing now. Excellent. Well, thank you, Brennan, for the invitation. Thanks to the Students and New Professionals chapter for all the work that you're doing and for creating workshop opportunities like this for our students and new professionals. And thank you, Jack, for kicking us off. So Brennan asked me to focus a little bit more on kind of the personal and professional aspects of why I pursued the professional engineering license and additional certifications. So that's really what I'm going to focus on. Like Jack, I'll start just with a slide very briefly. So those of you that are participants here that don't know me understand a little bit about my background. So my full-time job is I'm a professor of coastal engineering at the University of South Alabama. I've been here for I'm completing my 17th year, starting my 18th. So started here in 2007. And I actually got involved in coastal engineering at a fairly young age. So I started in high school working for coastal engineering consulting firms in Naples, Florida during the summer. And believe it or not, it was all because I was a certified scuba diver. Of all things, that's a weird way to enter the field. But a family friend who was a consulting coastal engineer in Naples knew that I was a certified diver and we had been diving before and invited me to work for them for the summer because they needed additional dive support to work on projects ranging from that company at the time, Suboceanic Consultants, had lots of large contracts with the U.S. Navy to do naval facilities inspections, which basically, if you don't know anything about that, you basically strap a tank to your back and put on a mask and fins and you're underwater all day with a clipboard and a camera, essentially taking notes about the conditions of the infrastructure, and you're kind of documenting deterioration, with photographs and scales, and you're making notes on a basically a dry erase board or a slate. So that's actually how I got kind of indoctrinated in the world of coastal engineering, kind of non-traditional. But they also had me servicing tide gauges and other instruments and doing beach profile surveys. So I thought, hey, this is a pretty cool job that I didn't even know existed. Up to that point, my path was essentially go get a 4-year engineering degree in something and then enter officer candidate school. And I wanted to be a naval aviator. So that's what I thought my career trajectory was until I found this wonderful, wacky world of coastal engineering. And so as my friend left and kind of changed jobs in Naples, I kind of followed him. And so worked for about 3 or 4 summers, over starting kind of at the end of my junior year of high school through my sophomore year of college, kind of working with different firms in South Florida, mainly during the summertime. Did all my studies at the University of Florida. So I kind of did the thing that in academia, everybody says you're not supposed to do. I got all 3 degrees from the same place. But for me, it worked. So immediately, before I even finished my bachelor's degree in civil engineering, I had passed and obtained my EIT in Florida. And kind of like Jack, there was just an expectation that this is something you do. It wasn't a requirement of the program at the University of Florida, like it is at the University of South Alabama, where we actually require all of our civil engineering students to take the FE exam before they graduate. They don't have to pass it, but they do have to take it. That wasn't a requirement for me, but it was kind of ingrained in me from a very early point in the engineering program that this is what you do. You get your engineering degree, you pass your EIT exam, and you pursue professional licensure. At the time, I actually, my pathway when I started my bachelor's program was to obtain a master's degree and be a consultant. So academia actually wasn't kind of a goal of mine when I started this. So pursuing professional licensure, since I wanted to be a practicing coastal engineer, it made sense to me. It was just something that I was going to do. But after obtaining my master's degree, I kind of decided to stay for my PhD. I liked academia and research, and I liked the balance of being able to be a consultant and an academic pretty much at the same time. So that really didn't change my trajectory at all. Professional licensure was still going to be a requirement if I wanted to be a practicing engineer. But there's a little bit more to that story that I'll get to in a second. So I had actually started doing some more consulting as a grad student at the University of Florida, and then came to the University of South Alabama as a faculty member. And then shortly after arriving, teamed up with another faculty member to open a business called South Coast Engineers. And that, like, working through that company in my time at the university is how I gained the experience to first become a PE in the state of Alabama, and then as project requirements dictated, picked up my PE in Florida as well. Since we're going to be talking about professional stuff, I always like to start kind of at the ground level and think about what is the definition of a profession. And whether you're an engineer or a scientist or a geologist or a biologist or whatever it is, do you actually have a profession? Is what you do a profession, and are you a professional? So the strict definition of a profession is it's a paid occupation, one that involves prolonged training and a formal qualification. That, with the exception of the last two words, that statement pretty much applies to anyone that obtains training at the university level. You have gone through prolonged training as a student, but then as a young professional in the job place, you have also gone through prolonged training. The thing that's often missing from the definition of the profession, which impacts people and their salaries and their livelihoods and their long-term growth, are those last two words, the formal qualification part. So there are a lot of jobs out there that don't require any formal qualification, some that actually do involve prolonged training, but no formal qualification at the end. And I'm not trying to disparage anybody that doesn't have a qualification process, but not having a formal qualification in what you do makes you less competitive in the job market, and also makes you less attractive when you are competing for work. So some additional expertise or qualification or certification is important for separating you from everybody else that's essentially doing the same thing, regardless of whether they have those certifications or not. Finding an opportunity to kind of break away from the pack and distinguish yourself as an expert in your field does involve, and in many cases require, some sort of a formal qualification. So I'm going to hit on three topics really quickly. Why I pursued the professional engineering license, the benefits to me personally and professionally, and also then wrap up talking about some other certifications. So I already alluded to this a little bit previously, but I pursued and wanted to become a professional engineer because I wanted to practice engineering, even when it became clear that my initial, early career was going to be kind of sitting around academia. That really didn't derail me at all. And I'm glad it didn't, because one of the things that I've come to recognize that I don't think I really picked up on as a student of engineering was that to establish yourself as an intellectual authority in the classroom or in a room where you're competing for a job, it also always comes down to what qualifications do you have and what do you bring to the table. I personally, this is, again, not trying to disparage anybody else that makes a different decision, but I personally thought that I would be somewhat of a hypocrite teaching other students to become engineers and expecting and encouraging them to pursue professional licensure if I did not do that myself. So a lot of what we do in engineering and science is training and modeling behavior. And if I haven't modeled and reinforced the behavior of pursuing licensure for myself, why would I take that as a reasonable expectation for a student that I'm teaching? It turned out that as a student, most of my faculty members were actually not practicing or licensed engineers. They had created an entire career out of academia, and for many of them that meant research, which absolutely does not require a PE whatsoever. However, when it comes to accreditation of programs, having faculty members with additional qualifications and expertise absolutely 100% helps. So it can be relevant even in academia, but it's absolutely 100% not a requirement. There are some university programs that will give you pay enhancements when you obtain your PE, but it's pretty rare, especially nowadays. Universities struggle financially, but the PE is definitely not required, but it's a huge benefit of establishing yourself as a positive role model for students in the classroom. And it also does absolutely help with accreditation. So it does help. Believe it or not, this may surprise some people, but it can actually hurt you in some ways. Now, the hurt is not direct, it's more indirect. And at most universities, they allow us as faculty members to teach people how to be engineers, but they don't allow us to practice engineering for liability reasons. So as a professional engineer, anytime and every time I affix my seal and signature to a plan set or a document or a memo or whatever it is, I am perpetually liable for that thing, that instrument that I have signed and sealed. Even after I retire from practicing engineering, I still have to carry what's called errors and omissions insurance in perpetuity for the rest of my life. So every single thing that I assign and seal, I am 100% liable for. And that may seem like a scary proposition, but guess what? We've got insurance for that. So it's not really that big of a deal. But the university takes it as a really big deal because they don't want to be perpetually liable for anything that I do. So that's why I practice engineering outside of the university. And that actually is fairly common in most universities and institutions around the United States. So while it doesn't hurt, you do have to tread very cautiously about the services and the roles that you take on as a faculty member at an academic institution. You can't be seen as offering or providing engineering services. You definitely cannot sign, seal, or affix a seal or a stamp to anything that I do through the university. It has to be 100% clear that while I'm employed by the university, I'm doing this operating through my business or as basically a sole proprietorship. The value of the PE to me was less financial and more just my career goals. I wanted to be a practicing engineer. To be able to do that, I wanted the autonomy, as an academic who may have followed a path where I was just kind of a sole proprietor and an individual sole consultant, to be able to do that kind of stuff on my own. It still helps that I'm in a business setting and I've got a team of people around me who are all PEs. So while it's not a requirement, I like to be able to do that stuff myself. So the value to me was just accomplishing a goal. But obviously being able to practice engineering has also financially benefited me as well. How often do I use it and what's the true cost? It turns out that, I don't use it as much as I thought I might. So there's most of the stuff I do is through the university. Only about 20% of my time is allocated to external endeavors. And a lot of that doesn't really require use of the PE whatsoever. But certainly when I do have to use it, it's valuable to have. To me, the true cost of the PE really kind of boils down to a couple things. Number one, like Jack said, you have to be pursuing your professional development hours and continuing education every year. So there's a cost to doing that. Fortunately, if you attend basically one ASBPA conference a year, you'll pretty much have almost all of your continuing education units that you need for that year. Almost, not quite. But in some states, you might have them all. So there's a cost to maintaining licensure, and then there's obviously a cost every year or 2 years, depending on your state, to renew that. And there's the upfront cost of taking the exam and preparing. But over the long term, relative to your earning potential, the cost of the PE is almost negligible. It's like round off error in a spreadsheet. So, to me, the benefit professionally is being able to work on projects that I want to work on. And being able to actually practice engineering. So developing a design of a project and seeing it built and constructed and knowing that I had a role in that as the engineer of record, it's exciting. It's nice to be able to go out of the water and look at these projects and know that I had a hand, a small hand, but a hand nonetheless, and helping that project come to reality to either benefit the public or benefit the client. Personally, I take great satisfaction out of being able to do these things. Again, for me, it's more of kind of a goal-based system than a financial reward-based system. This is just something personally that I wanted to do to obtain that licensure and be able to do this type of work, across the United States. What people lose track of, I think, is that each one of us that becomes a PE and licensed to practice engineering uplifts the entire profession. it validates what we do as a profession and keeps us relevant. If people in large quantities stop pursuing professional licensure, at some point we would seek to be a profession, because again, we would have a bunch of people trained as civil engineers or coastal engineers or mechanical engineers or whatever they are, but lack the formal qualification. So at some point we become more of a service provider than technical skills. And that generally would not be a good thing for us. And it would really allow some of these challenges to licensure that Dr. Caban mentioned earlier to really kind of fester and take root and really start to create problems for the engineering community. Obviously, there are financial benefits in the private sector. Jack alluded to that. They generally accompany substantial raises and pay increases in having your PE. There are other financial benefits that you may not necessarily think of. Your insurance, your practicing insurance is going to go down the more qualifications you have. You also are able to essentially obtain benefits for other sorts of insurance. Like because I'm a registered PE, I have access to a really nice like life insurance program that I wouldn't otherwise. That's way more competitive than going into the private marketplace. And that's just one example where having a PE kind of benefits you financially in a non-traditional way. Finally, going to close briefly with some discussion of certifications. So the other letters that I have at the end of my name, so that's the board certification process, which is still relatively new. It's only been around for about a decade, maybe a little bit more. But in addition to being a PE, I'm a board certified coastal engineer. Now, board certification exists. It's through the civil engineering, basically certification part, which is a kind of an offshoot of the American Society of Civil Engineers. But they've got different academies within ASCE and CEC that deal with additional like certification for people with, a lot of experience or special skills. So the Academy of Coast, Ocean, Port, and Navigation Engineers covers board certification for coastal, ocean, port, and navigation. So that'd be a BCCE, BCOE, BCPE, or BCNE. And then there are other academies that cover geotechnical engineering, and another academy that handles water resources engineering right now as well. Notice that I haven't said anything about structures, and it's because through the Structural Engineers Institute, you can actually obtain, in addition to being a PE, if you're going to practice structural engineering in some states, you actually also have to obtain the SE, or the structural engineering designation, especially in areas that are seismically active. But the board certifications are another certification that you can pursue to separate yourself from other practitioners and to show that you have additional skills, additional training, additional experience that can help deliver successful projects to clients. In some rare cases, for major infrastructure projects, we're actually starting to see board certification as a requirement. So somebody on your team has to be a board certified person in one of those areas that's most relevant or germane to the nature of the project. But there are also certifications kind of at the professional organizational level that would apply equally to engineers as they would to scientists. The ones that I know most about are like the Certified Coastal Professional Program through the Coastal Zone Foundation. Now there's a partnership with ASBPA where they deliver these courses before, like the day before ASBPA conference. They're also available online. The Certified Floodplain Manager, or the CFM designation, is another common one that we see in engineering practice and a lot of crossover in the coastal engineering world. And that's done through the Associated State Floodplain Managers. And then another one is the Project Manager Management Professional, or the PMP. Now, there are costs associated with all these certifications, so they really shouldn't be chased just, willy-nilly. You should really have a goal in mind of how you're going to use this, because some of them, like the PMP, can be quite expensive to obtain. There are other things like micro-credentials that are becoming more commonplace now. These are often done through universities, but there are some private companies that offer additional technical training kind of above and beyond your continuing education that you might do during the year to maintain your licensure, to essentially obtain a certificate in something or an additional designation, which again allows you to specialize a little bit more in your specific field. The most common form of micro-credentialing that exists right now are what are called graduate certificates. at universities. Like the University of South Alabama offers a graduate certificate in coastal engineering. So those that might already have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering, they can come back and take 4 classes either in person or online and obtain a certificate that says they have a graduate certificate in coastal engineering. So a little bit more than just having a bachelor's degree, and those exist in lots of different areas of engineering, and we're now starting to see them more in basic science areas as well. If you're interested in micro-credentialing, if you just Google that term, you'll find a bunch of universities that are offering these because they're good financial programs from them, because they do make money for the universities. Here's my contact information. I know we're going to have question and answer at the end, so I will stop talking now so we can turn it over to Taylor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Webb. Another incredible presentation. I want to make sure that we can try to stay on schedule as best we can. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Taylor. Taylor, again, same thing. I have your slides. If you prefer to drive, that's totally cool. Whichever.
Yeah, I got it.
Awesome.
All right, you guys got my screen? Cool. All right, yeah, so I'll just skip right into my introduction. There we go. Yeah, so education and experience. I graduated from Rowan University with a Bachelor of Science in Civil and Environmental Engineering. I took my EIT exam senior year winter break, so they encouraged it at the school and provided some guidance and suggested that you take it before graduating, whether you were going into grad school or the workforce or anything else. So I did that and I took it and I passed it then, which was awesome. So I kind of like didn't have that to worry about going forward into like my next step. So I recommend doing that if you're still an undergrad. Um, then I went to Stevens for my master's in ocean engineering, and I focus in coastal engineering with John Miller. And now I'm at McLaren, so the company I currently work at. I sit in New Jersey. I've been here for about 4 years. I do a lot of shoreline stabilization, revetment design, cut fill, volume calcs, hydro drone surveys and inspections. So that's like the majority of my work. A bit of design as well. So that's where like the PE part comes in. I took my exam with like 2.5 years of experience here. Um, I think that was a good time for me to start studying and take my exam. The first 2 years, I feel like I spent like establishing myself in my role, like just getting the initial experience of like your first time working for a consulting company. So yeah, 2.5 years in, I was like, okay, I feel ready to, set some time aside and study for my PE. So I did that. I studied for about 3 months with EET, which is like the online um training course, and it worked really well. And yeah, I got my PE in water resources engineering. So another thing with that is with coastal engineering specifically, there aren't too many overlapping areas in the PE options for civil. Um, like for geotechnical, if you're doing that every day, like there's a geotechnical test, and like some of that stuff might be more relevant. But with coastal, water resources, I was most comfortable in. So that's the one I took. I didn't have any of that experience from working. So a lot of it was just studying and like learning it while I was studying. So that's something to consider too, if you're like seeing this stuff in your day-to-day job. Next, going to speak to my experience as a young professional in the private sector with the PE. So again, I work for like a smaller engineering company, 250 people, and we have like 10 markets. So marine is only one of those markets made up of about like 30 to 40 people. So it's a smaller group. Um, all of our drawing sets go through one person who's our QC engineer who like oversees everything. and he's the only one that will stamp a drawing with his PE. So even though I have a PE, I'm not like stamping anything at the moment. Um, but there are a lot of pros to having your PE, even though I'm not actually the one stamping the drawing. One, it helps, build your portfolio as an employee and engineer. So if your name is listed on a proposal with having a PE, you might be more likely to get that job because it's like a qualification that you have and can offer. Um, Another thing, with a PE, you could be eligible for a promotion or increased pay due to having that title. Um, Another thing is like a team lead for inspections. So we do a lot of inspection work of any like nearshore infrastructure, seawalls, anything like that. And a PE is required to like lead the team for that inspection. So if you're not a PE, you could be an assistant inspector, but you couldn't lead that inspection. So that's another benefit of having it if that's the route you're going. And then lastly, it just shows a bit of credibility. Um, the PE has information on it that some things you may have never heard of or like may never use again, but having that license shows that you could like learn a topic quickly, learn equations quickly, and apply those formulas to solve different problems that you may have never seen before. Um, and just having that qualification like transfers to your day-to-day work. So each project brings a unique challenge, and you're always met with new equations or new manuals that you need to use in order to solve it. So even though some of the specific questions might not be applicable to your day to day, the concepts definitely transfer really well. And then I just have a bit of advice with like a young professional in the private sector with a PE. Um, Try to learn from a PE as soon as possible. Like even when you first start, try to like have a PE as your supervisor or a mentor, project manager, anything like that. Um, just ask them questions. They can give you advice, kind of like what we're doing now. Um, and then, just what to look for when you're working on a drawing set, when you're designing, when you're like looking at like equations, stuff like that. So just have a PE as a mentor if you can, and ask them a lot of questions to kind of help you like navigate your path forward. The next thing is review drawings and just volunteer to learn or like to review new things. I think even reviewing drawings and equations and calc packages, that's a big part of learning. Just seeing how it's done and seeing like what the outcome should look like. That's helpful, even if you're not the one doing the actual work. And then lastly, get familiar with using manuals like the Army Corps Coastal Engineering Manual, the Shore Protection Manual, um, any manual that might fit your uh, expertise. All these manuals have technical guidance, technical language, and equations that you will have to reference. And knowing this stuff is helpful for the job, but it also helps like with your PE, seeing an equation and being able to know how to use it and where to apply it. So, specific to my time and experience earning my PE, in New Jersey, you can take the PE before your 3 or 4 years of experience needed to apply for the license. So again, I took mine at 2.5 years of experience, but I didn't apply until I had 3, including my master's. Um, and yeah, I applied through NCEES, and I'm just gonna kind of walk through what that looks like and like what you need for it. So this is kind of the setup. So this is everything you need to fill in when you're applying. So basic stuff like contact information, personal information, where did you go to school, stuff like that. And then we get into work experience, which is what I'll be talking about today, professional references, and then, I mean, that's really it. Um, but professional references, basically that's send out a PDF to five people, three of which need to be PEs, that can kind of, attest to your character and engineering skills. And it's a pretty quick um, thing. It's just you press a button, it emails them, and they send it back. So you don't even see the information on it. You just know if they submitted or not. But yeah, again, we're gonna work through the work experience. So this is what mine looked like when I submitted it. Um, we have like years of experience, um, and then your employers that you had, your PE experience under. So I have three employments listed, two under a PE or one under a PE. Um, so if we keep going through, this is what my experience looked like for McLaren. So basically, I have, my employment dates, duration, who my PE was, and then it's kind of broken up into two things you have to type. So one is tasks and duties, and one is representative projects. So like that's kind of what you have to fill in for each job that contributes to your total experience. So tasks and duties looks like this. So again, it's pretty short. It's not as time consuming as it once was to apply. So 300 words maximum. And, you're describing your branch of engineering, the nature of work with the employer, and then like your range of positions. So, like for me, I said I'm in like coastal marine engineering. I think I might have mentioned civil just to like relate it back to the PE. I talked about like my engineering responsibilities, including like design work, drawings, rehabilitation, inspection. Um, yeah, and then just kind of expanded on the relevant like design information. So that's that one. This is a bit more like general, big picture. Oh, and then the last one too, explain the full range of positions. So I also like wrote how I came in as an engineer one, worked my way up to engineer two, increased responsibilities, engineer three, increased responsibilities. So you kind of show how your um, responsibilities grew as you get promoted or something like that, which also like looks good for them. Next is representative projects. So this is where you get into a bit more detail of what you did in each project. So if you look at the bottom right figure, you can use this to know how many projects that you're going to type in for this. So 5 years of employment, um, which is where I fell, that's 2 to 3 projects. So I submitted 3 projects for my license and got approved. But I guess if you have, the more years of employment, the more projects you have to submit. But the sooner you do it, the less you have to submit. So yeah, 3 projects. And you talk about these guidelines. So, you discuss your role in the project, describe the project as a whole, talk about, you know, your responsibilities from an engineering standpoint, everything you did with it. I suggest referencing manuals and like, uh, Army Corps manual or like shore protection manual, something like that. So like they kind of know that, you're referencing manuals, using the right equations, working on the design, from an engineering standpoint. So that's it. That's all I have. Any questions on, NCES, studying for the test, um, getting your license like early in your career? So reach out anytime. I have my email and my LinkedIn linked as well. So thank you.
So much, Taylor. Another great presentation. I think that information about, after passing the exam and demonstrating all your experience, at least for me, like that's something I haven't heard a lot of, talk about, and so that was very valuable information for me. If it's okay with everybody, we're running a little bit late and behind schedule, but sounds like all of our presenters are available to stick around a little bit for questions and answers. So we are going to go keep the schedule. And so next we will have Ben and Tyler go through a little bit of information about what some of the changes to the exam have been recently, and what you guys should expect for the actual exam. Again, guys, please feel free to add your questions into the chat, and we can get those answered. Also, if you need to drop off, I completely understand. We thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your day. And again, this will all be made available to you guys afterwards.
All right, you guys got the presentation?
Yep.
Awesome. Go ahead, Tyler.
Starting with the evolution of the PE exam, I will quickly go over some PE specific info and then turn it over to Ben to go over some of our experiences with the PE, and then also Nicole McLean's experiences, as she could not be on this segment. So the exam format has definitely changed over the years with material and format. Like Dr. Webb might have taken it on paper and pencil or stone and chisel, we may never know. I did take it on a computer-based exam, and there have been updates as recently as April 2024. So it's important to stay up to date on the NCEES website. So which exam is for us forgotten coastal engineers? Well, it's really important to talk with your employer or your peers and kind of figure out what exam may fit your background and comfort level. There are multiple civil options, an environmental option, and even naval architecture and marine engineering. And there have been recent updates to the civil exams in April 2024. But ultimately, talk to your employers, peers, and figure out what test will be easiest for you within your realm of practice. I'll now throw it to Ben to talk about some experiences.
Yeah, so as you're looking at kind of registering for the exam, first thing is that you're going to be taking your exam through a Pearson testing center, and there are only so many exams to go around. So once you kind of figure out that, hey, I want to take my my PE exam around this date, then go ahead and get on NCEES's website and find the best time to schedule your exam and at what testing center. And in my experience, I registered about 3.5 months out. I'm in New York City, so there was a few more testing centers around, and I was able to find an exam, but there were certainly a lot of appointments filled up. You can reschedule an exam if you decide you want to push it back or find a different testing site that works a little bit better for you. But there is a fee associated with that. I think it's $50 or $100 to reschedule the exam. So going to talk for Nicole, Tyler, and I. We all kind of had the same schedule. We utilized a studying program. Tyler and Nicole utilized School of PE, and I used the EET on-demand classes. Studied for about 2 hours per day, varied obviously depending on schedule. On the weekends, since there's a little bit more free time, Nicole and I both took the exam when we were employees at an engineering firm. Tyler took his when he was a student. Tyler, I don't know if you want to touch any more on that.
Yeah, I feel like I took advantage of the flexible schedule I had as a student and was able to study, before summer started and take advantage of that summer break to take my exam.
Study tips. A lot of these get covered in either the School of PE class or the EET class. The instructors there really prepare you for being able to master the exam. But the more practice problems you're doing and the more comfortable you are with solving the style of problems that are going to be on the PE exam, the more comfortable you're going to be on test day. Using the calculator that you're going to use on test day. This is what I had, the TI 36 Pro. But it is super valuable to not have to figure out, all right, if there's certain formulas that you can put in or certain equations that are preloaded into the calculator, to not have to waste time doing that. And become familiar with the reference handbook is huge, because you can press Control F and search the entire handbook, but only certain words, only certain phrases are going to pop up. So knowing which keywords to put in there for which types of problems, and knowing what parts of the handbook to be familiar with will really save you time on the exam. Also, there are a fair amount of easy, extremely straightforward plug and chug questions. And the biggest thing is to really ace those, because it's free points. You don't want to give those away. And then something Tyler put up here, to don't sweat the extremely difficult problems during studying and during the exam itself, because you're allowed to get some wrong. You don't need to have 100% to be able to pass and get your passing score on the PE exam. Kind of transitioning into the exam day tips. It's split similarly between the morning and the afternoon session. I had 42 questions in the morning and 38 in the afternoon, same as Nicole. It is an 8-hour exam, so being prepared to sit at the computer for 8 hours and kind of have that testing stamina, but also not being afraid to take some breaks throughout that. You get one untimed break that doesn't count against your time for the test in the middle once you finish the morning session, but also you can leave the testing room as many times as you want. If you need to go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, whatever. It's really important for you to be comfortable in the testing room, especially since you're just sitting at one desk with one computer and a little pad of laminated paper to work off of. Nicole has on here, pay attention to units. It's really tricky sometimes, as far as, hey, you might have gallons per minute when you need cubic feet per second, or something simple like that, where you know how to solve the entire problem, and it's one little unit change that trips you up. And NCES will put on a really close incorrect answer, such as, hey, you solved this problem with the wrong units. Tyler, if you had anything to add, I don't want to talk for you the whole time, but also trying to get through here so we can have time for Q&A.
I think really just that kind of helped me is everybody talked about, oh, you might be limited on time. But for me, I felt like I had a little bit of extra time, and not being afraid to take a bathroom break or even just go out and clear my head helped me get back into the test and be comfortable when I may be stressed or had trouble with a problem. So I would say don't be afraid of that.
Yeah. Is that it? That might be it. It is. Awesome. I don't know if we have any questions we want to go through here, but as far as what's different, I know Tyler did mention there was some updates to the April exam, and the new format for the civil engineering exam is that there is kind of an elimination of the breadth section. So now there's only 2 sections of depth, but they have kind of a larger general engineering section. So a lot, especially in the civil water resources exam, which I took, Tyler took, and I believe Nicole took that as well, a lot of the same topics are covered. So a lot of the study materials that you can find for the exam prior to April 2024 are still going to be super helpful and relevant.
Awesome. Okay, so again, thank you guys so much. I appreciate all of our presenters today. We can go ahead and open it up to some Q&A. I know some people have been typing questions in the chat. So some of the answers are there. Feel free to take a look. We won't go through those verbally. I will open it up now. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat or come off mute. I also have some from initial sign up form. You can ask if anybody else has any questions.
I got a general question. So
Go ahead,
this
Bolt.
is for like all 3 presenters, whatever one can answer. But like I've seen like people have like an EI or an EIT. Like what's the difference between those? Like the engineering intern versus engineering in training. Is it like the same thing? I'm just
Yeah, I
wondering.
think that's just like the state licensing board like their terminology is the only thing that really is. It's all, but it's the same thing. Because I think when I first got mine, I was in EI in Mississippi because that was where I took my exam. But if I wanted to get it in Louisiana, or maybe it was if I want to get it in Tennessee, it was going to be an EIT, but it's the same thing. And then I guess on that same kind of note, I mean, make sure you kind of keep up with what your state's terminology and their requirements are, because some of them vary from state to state, but just make sure you always keep up with that. Like if you're moving to a new state to do work, get familiar with the licensing board and find out like who's on it. And I guess, whatever you can to stay up to date on their requirements, because they do update their bylaws and the requirements from time to time. So you want to make sure that you don't miss something, because Louisiana used to have a situation where you had to have 30 license or PDH hours per licensing renewal period. And then they changed it just in the last few years where you have to have 30 total, but you have to have 15 for each year. So you can't just be like at the last minute, go get 30 hours, like, in December before your license expires, and then try to keep on top of it. Plus they also made it to where you have to have 1 hour of ethics training per year. So you got to make sure that you keep up with that kind of stuff, and just make sure you know the board requirements.
We got a question from Dane in the chat. I guess this is open-ended, general, since he didn't specify anybody. This question is: any advice on ways to get professional experience for PE while in a non-engineering role, i.e. academic?
Yeah, actually, most states recognize your time in academia, especially if you are teaching design-based courses, as experience. Some states actually have special exemptions for faculty that soften, not completely waive or eliminate, but soften the language around what constitutes experience for verification purposes. It does make it a lot easier if you're working in an environment where your direct supervisor is a licensed PE, because they can verify your experience in your work. But there are provisions for getting some of that experience verification, even in situations where you're not working in that sort of environment. So it's definitely possible. The only thing that they generally, all states, well, if you don't know this by now, you will learn very quickly that every single state handles licensing in a very different way. Their rules, their exceptions, their requirements, there's a lot of consistency, but there are also lots of nuances that make them different. So what I'm saying, in terms of my experience in Alabama, Florida, states in the Southeast, it might vary. So your mileage may vary here. But one of the things that generally you can't do in most cases, or in a very limited fashion, is double count time. So if you're a student obtaining a degree, in most states, you'll get a year's worth of experience credit for a master's degree and another year's worth of experience credit for a PhD. But you can't also be working simultaneously or counting additional credit at the time. So they're not going to give you 2 years for the price of one, basically.
Thank you, Dr. Webb. Any other questions from the audience, from the group?
I'll just jump in real quick too, and just kind of mention. I don't know. It may have been mentioned. I have to step away for a second, but if you're licensed in one state, most of the time you can get reciprocity from another state. So if you're a person working in Louisiana like myself, and you're trying to do a project in Mississippi or Alabama or somewhere like that, and you have to have a licensed person in that state, you can usually apply for a license without having to go through it's a lot easier process. You don't have to go through like a new exam and all that stuff. You just kind of go through, depending on what the state is, it's usually like show your verification of your license and that you're in good standing in your home state, and they'll grant you a license course with a fee to be a licensed in another state. There are some exceptions. I think like Florida and California are pretty strict about engineering licenses and geology licenses, like because of their I guess very unique geological conditions. They have, certain things that you can do reciprocity, but you also have to take a certain exam that's specific to their issues. So just kind of something to throw out there in case anyone's wanting to get licensed in other states. I'm licensed in Mississippi and in Louisiana for geology, but I'm only PE in Louisiana because I've never really needed to get outside of the state. But we have some folks I've worked with who are licensed in like 40 states. It's, at that point, it becomes a very expensive licensing process. But I guess if your company requires you to have that so they can do work in those states, it can make you valuable to a broader range of projects.
Yeah, I can follow up on that too. So I applied in New Jersey and got my New Jersey license. And then I sent my NCES record to New York. But then I also had to like go through the state as well. So it's it's NCES, yes, but it's also like the state that you need to like get in touch with.
Yeah, the information that Taylor was sharing earlier about showing the NCES record, I really cannot, state the importance of creating that and maintaining it, especially as you kind of travel through the early part of your career, where you might be, moving from job to job, where you might be in a working with an employer that's going to start pursuing work in other states. Having that council record makes application for reciprocity so much easier because all of that record keeping is done and it's transmitted to the state. Like Taylor said, there's still specific stuff you have to do with state, but imagine without that NCES record, which they used to call a council record, but now they just kind of it's the record. Without establishing that, anytime you want to apply for licensure in a state, you have to start over from scratch, gathering all of your experience verification, all of your licensure and certification, all your exam information. It just becomes very redundant. So the record simplifies that quite a bit. Doesn't eliminate all of the headaches, but it eliminates a lot of them.
And now some states are even using that for PDH tracking. So hopefully all states will catch on and it will get easier in the future, but that's a new thing that's occurring too.
All right, if there's no further questions from the group, and again, as I go through some other questions, feel free to type it in the chat, or if there's like a break, just feel free to come off mute. One question I got for Jack, it was I guess more PhD specific and less PE specific, but the question is how much value does a PhD provide in a non-academic setting?
I think I've worked with a lot of PhDs over the years at Fugro and at Worley now, and I don't know. It's hard to say like it really provides that much value direct to the work you're doing because a PhD, at least in my case, and I'm sure a lot of others, it's a really specialized area of study. So, I mean, for a project for us to get that would match my study is very unlikely. But it definitely gives you like this kind of instant credibility. And when people see that you have that, they understand that you've gone through that extra work, and there's a lot of effort and academic rigor that goes into that. So, but I think also it really kind of teaches you how to think on a more critical level. So for me, it's been helpful when I look at a project. I kind of break it apart a little bit more and look at like what's the potential failures and things we need to think about that otherwise I wouldn't have thought of. So I think there's definitely there's a lot of value to it, but it's not as on the surface as you think, I guess, is the way I'd say it.
Thank you, Jack. I have a question for Taylor. New York is one of the most challenging states to have your PE license in. Could you provide any tips, tricks for documenting PDH hours? Also, what does it take to be a commercial drone pilot?
So the first question, I applied to New York and I didn't hear back yet. I'm still waiting because the process is like 6 months plus or minus. So yeah, I don't know if, they'll ask for more information or my application will be good, but so far for me, it's just been the standard application. So nothing like more or less, at least for civil water resources exam. And then second, the drone pilot. I have my FAA license, Part 107 license. So it was like a 1 to 2 hour exam to take it and pass it, and that's really it to get the license. But yeah, if you have any questions or like want any resources for studying, I can definitely provide those if you send me an email.
Thank you, Taylor. And final question, I think majority of these have kind of been answered throughout, and even this one. But just wanted to open it up and see if our panel had any final, comments or remarks about the process of maintaining your license.
Yeah, actually, I just pulled up my PDH here, and I'll share my screen real quick, and I'll show you kind of like how I keep up with things. So, if you guys can see, Louisiana has this form that they put up there, and I just turned it into an Excel spreadsheet. So it gives you the
We don't have
Jack,
requirements.
yeah, we can't see.
Oh, sorry. Here, let me try that again. Let's see, screen 2. Oh, there we go. All right, so hopefully now you can see it. And let me move this out of the way so I can see it. So anyway, yeah, so this kind of, I put down all the bylaws and requirements here so I understand, and this tells you what all these things stand for and what the value of each thing is. Like if you're a member of a technical society, you can get PDHs just for joining. And if you're a board member, or you get like, I think, extra points. If you're a presenter on a technical talk, you get twice as many hours versus attending and listening. So all these things here are good to keep track of. And then, so I have a spreadsheet that I run, and you're allowed to carry over, I think 7 per year, something like that. So I keep my carryover hours, and just like every time I go to a meeting or anytime I present, it's something like that that's technical, and you have to use your judgment sometime. Like if you're going to giving a presentation on, I don't know, like a TV show or something, you couldn't put that down as a PDH. But if you're going to an actual presentation and talking about something that's technical in nature, you can count that towards your records. So and I have like PDA or PDFs of some of these certificates where they're available, but just this kind of keeping track of this helps so much in knowing how much you have. And then I keep my renewal dates and everything down here too, so that way I know, because actually I almost lapsed my PG just last month because I didn't get the email, because when I changed jobs they'd sent the renewal notice to my old email. And so that was another thing about staying up to date. It's like, oh crap, I better look here and make sure that they've got my new information. So now that's all been fixed and I've renewed. But and they usually give you like a month or something of time before you have to pay a late fee. And then if it's out, you get even farther out, then you have to go and reapply, which is a big headache, and you don't want to have to do that. But like what happened to me when I moved back and forth from Tennessee to Louisiana and back. So yeah, I definitely recommend, like if your state has something like this, and some states require you to keep these kinds of records. So make something like this, and then like what they all stand for. Like mine, most of them are engineering because of my PE sheet, but like I make sure to highlight the ethics ones. That way I know that it's done. And then every year, like ASCE does a crawfish boil where they have a guy come and give an hour-long presentation on ethics. That way I know I've got that one covered. And most engineering conferences you go to, they'll give you that stuff. And a lot of times, like Brett said, if you attend a conference like ASBPA's National Coastal Conference, you can knock out almost your entire year's worth of PDHs in one conference. So those kinds of things are really good to attend, and it makes it a lot easier. Plus, conferences can be fun, and there's like a good networking aspect to them too. So there are a lot of benefits that go into those things beyond just your licensure.
I have a question about the PDH. Is that only required after your PE, or do engineering interns at your EITs, do they need to worry about that as well?
I don't think so. To my knowledge, your EI is, you may have to renew it if you don't, but I think they're basically designed where you register one time and then it expires when you get your PE, like 5 years later or however long it is until you take your exam. But it may depend on the state too, but I've never seen a requirement for PDHs on EIs or GITs. but it can't hurt to, you know, get in the mode of doing that. It'll kind of get you ready for when you go into your career or into your PE rather.
Yeah, one of the things that ASE and NSPE, National Society for Professional Engineers, push frequently is just the adoption of a commitment to lifelong learning. You know, that regardless of whether you're trying to maintain licensures or certifications or not, that it's a way in which we, you know, remain current on, you know, trends in our fields, you know, techniques, you know, things change over time. Even though the practice of, you know, coastal science and engineering has not been around all that very long in a formal fashion, it's changed a lot in the time it has been around. So the things that we do today, you know, definitely are not the things we were doing 50 years ago. In attending continuing education events, classes, professional society meetings, conferences, that's a good way to remain current. So even if you don't have a requirement to do it, you should probably do it anyways. I just realized though, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here because everybody participating in this is probably the same group of people that don't need to be told to, you know, remain current.
Well, I just got a message from Brennan that his laptop just died. So
I guess that means it's over.
yeah. Yeah, but he did say that was the last question. So unless anyone else has any additional questions, we want to thank all the speakers so much for joining us today. This has been really a great session. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to any of the speakers directly or to the ASBPA S&P email. So with that, thanks everyone, and hope you have a wonderful evening.
Yeah, thanks again, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys.